Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Imagine stumbling upon an old death certificate, its edges frayed with time, the ink nearly faded to nothing. A name you've never heard before, a woman from a forgotten corner of America, gone before her life even had the chance to begin. But as your eyes travel down the page, you stop. Your breath catches. Cause of death, childbirth, and the child listed, her own brother. That single line feels like a ghost reaching out from the paper, begging you to read deeper, daring you to see the truth that the town tried to bury for more than a century. This is not the kind of story you find in history textbooks. It doesn't appear in school lessons or family Bibles. It lingers in whispers, in yellowed newspaper scraps, in the memories of old men who drank too much and spoke too freely. A girl, trapped in the darkest cycle of inbreeding America ever produced, condemned to carry not only her family's shame, but her own brother inside her womb. Her story is the kind you're not supposed to know, the kind that makes entire communities look away, pretending it never happened. In those days, families like hers lived on the margins of society, where roads turned to dirt and neighbors minded their silence. Poverty mixed with isolation, and isolation bred desperation. What was once whispered as keeping it in the family became a curse passed from one generation to the next, and at the center of this curse stood a young girl whose life was swallowed before she could even understand the world around her. Tonight, we are peeling back the rotted floorboards of history, uncovering the stench of a truth so grotesque it feels impossible. Yet the records exist, the witnesses lived. The baby was real. This is the story of America's darkest inbred child, and the girl who paid for that child with her life. She was born into a world already fractured. Her family had long been marked by whispers of bad blood. Neighbors knew something was wrong but rarely said it out loud. They'd point at the strange faces peering out from behind torn curtains, the children with crossed eyes and twisted jaws, the adults who never quite seemed to grow up in their minds. They weren't outsiders to the town, they were shadows inside it. Always present, yet never truly acknowledged. From the beginning, her path was sealed. She had no chance at a normal life. Schooling was sparse, if it existed at all. Medical care was a luxury reserved for those with names the county clerk recognized. For her, every day blurred into survival, fetching water, tending fires, and obeying the unspoken rules of a family trapped within its own decaying circle. And behind those rules was something darker, a silence enforced not by words, but by fear. Her father was more than just the head of the household. He was a figure of control, a man who twisted morality into something unrecognizable. In his mind, bloodlines had to remain pure. Outsiders could not be trusted, and so he kept his family locked inside itself, bound by flesh, chained by shame. To him, the girl was not a daughter, not a child, but a vessel, one more body in which his family's legacy could fester and grow. It was in her teenage years that the rumors began to spread more openly. Shopkeepers noticed her swollen belly, yet no husband was ever seen. A neighbor swore they heard cries in the night, muffled, pleading, but no one dared to step onto that property, not after what happened to the last man who tried. He left town, beaten, broken, and forever silent. The girl was left behind, and so was her secret. But secrets never stay hidden forever. Her death certificate was not just a document, it was a confession, because on the night she went into Lobo, it was not only her body that tore apart, it was the thin veil her family had kept over decades of sin. She wasn't just delivering a child, she was delivering her father's son. She was delivering her own brother. The night she went into labor was not marked by celebration, but by dread. There were no midwives rushing to her side, no neighbors bringing broth or blankets. There was only the suffocating silence of the cabin walls and the stench of fear that had soaked into the very floorboards. For hours, her screams echoed through the hollows, carried on the wind like the cry of something wild and wounded. Yet no one came. No one ever came. By then, the family was used to looking the other way. The older children had seen births before, strange, cursed births where babies came out twisted, gasping or lifeless. They'd seen the mother, sometimes a sister, sometimes an aunt, fade away in bloody sheets while the patriarch muttered prayers no preacher would ever recognize. It was a cycle, a ritual of decay, and she had been chosen to carry it forward. Her body was too young, too frail to endure what was demanded of it. Still, she fought, clutching at the bed frame, clawing at the mattress until her nails tore. Every push drew her closer to death. And when the child finally came, silence followed. No newborn's cry filled the night, only the shallow, broken breaths of a girl whose life was slipping away. The family watched, their faces blank, as though they had witnessed it all before. For them, this was not tragedy, it was routine. And yet, there was something different about this night. The child she bore was not just another inbred descendant. He was both her son and her brother. His existence crossed a line even her family had never spoken aloud. The shame of it was too heavy, even for them. To admit what had happened would be to admit that the bloodline had devoured itself completely. So they did what families like hers had always done. They buried it, literally and figuratively. She was laid in a shallow grave behind the cabin, no marker to remember her by. The baby, weak and struggling, was whisked away. Some say he died within days, others claim he survived, his twisted body hidden away from the world. What is certain is that her story was never told, not in daylight. It was carried instead in hushed tones, in warnings whispered to children. Don't go near that family. Don't ask about that girl. But history has a way of clawing its way back to the surface, and so, even as the soil covered her body, the truth refused to stay buried. In the years that followed her death, the family withdrew even further from the world. What little trust the town had in them evaporated overnight. People avoided their path in church if they ever dared to show their faces there at all. Children were warned not to wander too close to their land, not even for dares, because everyone knew what kind of things happened behind those doors. Yet still, no one intervened. In America at that time, silence was often the safest choice. Poverty was overlooked, abuse ignored, and inbreeding brushed aside as something too shameful to speak aloud. But the whispers did not stop. The story of the girl who died giving birth to her own brother passed from mouth to mouth, each telling more haunting than the last. Old women in rocking chairs would lower their voices, saying she appeared in dreams, calling out with hollow eyes, begging to be remembered. Men at the tavern told it differently, that her father had struck a deal with the devil, and her death was the price. The truth lay somewhere between fact and myth, and the line blurred more with each passing year. What makes her story more chilling is how ordinary it was in the shadows of forgotten America. Families left to rot in isolation often turned inward, and when they did, generations of damage followed. Birth defects, mental decline, early deaths, these were not accidents of fate, but the consequence of choices enforced by men who valued bloodlines over humanity. She was not the first to suffer, and she would not be the last. And yet, her case lingers because of what it symbolized. A girl destroyed by her own family, a child born into the impossible role of being both brother and son. It was the kind of grotesque knot that could only unravel in tragedy. To the outside world, her death certificate was a curiosity, an error, something that could not be real. But to those who lived closest, it was proof of everything they already feared. Even now, fragments of her existence remain. A photograph tucked into a county archive, her face blurred with time. A handwritten letter from a preacher warning another congregation about the dangers of certain households, and the memory of a grave behind a cabin long since swallowed by weeds. These remnants do not just tell the story of one girl, they expose the hidden sickness at the heart of a community, and perhaps at the heart of America itself. If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if this was your bloodline? Would you have walked away, or would the silence have trapped you too? Because the truth is, This wasn't just one family's curse. It was a pattern repeated across the forgotten corners of the country. Every state had its hidden valleys, its back roads where outsiders rarely traveled, its shacks where windows stayed boarded and screams were muffled by the wind, and in those places, history repeated itself. Daughters became mothers to their own siblings, sons became fathers to their own nephews, each generation folding in on itself until the bloodline resembled a twisted knot no one could untangle. Her story might disturb us because it feels so unthinkable, but part of its horror lies in how easy it was for people to look away. The officials who saw the records but filed them quietly, the doctors who noticed the deformities but never asked why, the neighbors who heard but refused to act. The silence was not just in her family, it was in the whole community, and silence can be as deadly as any crime. It's haunting to consider that her child, her brother, may have lived. If he survived, what kind of life could he have led? Did he grow up knowing the truth, or was it hidden from him until the whispers found him in adulthood? Did he live in shame, or did he become another hand that carried the curse forward? In small towns, history has a way of folding back on itself. You can move away, you can change your name, but blood has a memory, and that memory can be merciless. To imagine him as a man is to imagine the living embodiment of everything his family tried to hide, a man born from a womb that was never meant to bear him, carrying in his veins the weight of both son and brother. Did he ever escape? Or did he, like his mother, become an other ghost trapped in a cycle no one dared to break? These are the questions history refuses to answer, and perhaps that's what makes them so terrifying. By the time a generation had passed, her story had become more legend than fact. The cabin still stood, but no one lived there for long. Tenants would move in, lured by the cheap rent, only to leave after a season, speaking of strange noises at night or a feeling of being watched. Hunters swore they saw a pale figure wandering near the tree line, a young girl in a torn nightdress, her eyes sunken, her mouth moving as if whispering words too faint to hear. Whether these were ghost stories or guilty imaginations hardly mattered. Her presence had fused with the land itself. But beneath the folklore, the paper trail lingered. County clerks kept the records because that was their job, even if they never spoke of them aloud. Doctors' notes, coroners' signatures, census forms, together they painted a picture that could not be erased. Every document confirmed what the town tried so desperately to deny, that she had existed, that she had died in childbirth, and that the baby she bore was both her brother and her son. The family name faded from the county rolls eventually, but not before leaving scars. Children from that bloodline, scattered into other communities, carried the mark of it with them. Strange features, odd behaviors, whispers that followed them from schoolyard to grave. People did not say the word inbred, but they didn't have to. You could see it in their eyes, hear it in their speech, notice it in the way they never quite fit. The curse lingered long after the grave had been forgotten. And still, there are those who search for the truth. Genealogists, historians, even ordinary people tracing family trees stumble across her story like a landmine. They find the date of death, they find the child's birth, and then they see the names and realize the impossible. To them, she is not just a footnote. She is a warning, a reminder of what can happen when silence and sect take root so deeply that they strangle an entire bloodline. Even now, somewhere in America, descendants may be walking among us, carrying fragments of her tragedy without even knowing it. Perhaps they feel it as a heaviness they can't explain, or an unease when they hear certain family stories. Perhaps it's only a whisper in their blood, but whispers can echo for centuries. Some stories are too heavy for the living to carry, so they sink into the soil, waiting for someone brave, or foolish, enough to dig them back up. Hers is one of those stories. A girl whose name has nearly vanished, whose grave was left unmarked, yet whose suffering has echoed across time. She died giving birth not just to a child, but to a truth so unbearable that her entire community tried to erase it. But erasure is never complete. The past always leaves fingerprints. Think of how many times this tale could have been lost forever. A single missing document, a fire in the courthouse, a forgotten drawer of records, and her life would have vanished completely. Yet somehow, her story survived, stitched together from scraps of paper, hushed confessions and whispered warnings. It survived because it needed to, because buried truths have a way of clawing themselves back into the light, no matter how hard we try to forget them. And so, we are left with the image of her, a young girl trapped by the very people meant to protect her, forced to carry her family's secret until it destroyed her. We imagine her last moments, torn between pain and silence, her body failing under a weight she never chose. We imagine the baby, her brother, her son, his tiny life carrying the impossible burden of being born into a world that did not want him. Their existence reminds us that history is not just triumphs and victories. It is also shame, cruelty, and the kind of darkness people would rather never admit. As we close this story, remember that what disturbs us most is not the grotesque details, it's how ordinary silence made them possible. Neighbors looked away. Officials filed their papers and never spoke of them again, and that is how tragedies like hers take root, not in sudden explosions of violence, but in the slow, steady rot of secrecy and denial. Her grave may be lost, but her story endures. It lingers in the documents, in the folklore, and now in your memory. You have heard it, and you cannot unhear it, and perhaps that is the only justice she will ever receive, that someone, even now, refuses to let her be forgotten. Because the past is not gone, the past is watching, and sometimes, if you listen closely enough, it speaks.